This is Good Morning Dublin on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Colin McStay here. Now, the British electorate go to the polls next month in what could be described as an era-defining referendum on whether to leave the European Union or to remain part of it. With issues of the future of Britain's economy, sovereignty and security at the centre of debates and interviews to date. I'm joined on the line by the British Libertarian Keir Martland. Good morning, Keir. You'd slide towards an exit of the EU, I think, having weighed up all the issues, Keir.
Yes, I would, but I'm probably not as enthusiastic as other people are on the British right. Yeah.
And is the economy really the centrepiece of why Brexiters or potential Brexiters at the polls should consider leaving the EU and go about it themselves?
I don't think economics is the main issue. I think you can probably make up any statistics you like about how many jobs we might gain or how much money we might lose or whatever if we were to leave or stay in the European Union. I think it's really an issue of politics. It's an issue of what the Americans call secession, that is, leaving a bigger state in favour of a more decentralised version of a more decentralised model.
Yeah, and it's the fifth largest economy in the world at the moment based on the different global figures, and the UK. So would this, though, on the other side of things, would that you'd be pulling out because of the bilateral trade agreements that are in place with major trade deals, which would involve the likes of France, Germany and Spain. So how can Britain work around that if it is indeed a Brexit after June?
Trade deals have never been a problem for Britain throughout its history. We traded with the world. We sort of invented the idea of free trade, for goodness sake. Without the European Union, if we leave the European Union, we'll be fine in terms of free trade. As I said, it's not the main issue. The main issue is one of politics, one of sort of exposing the naked emperor in Westminster, making sure that we give our own politicians proper scrutiny rather than allowing them to use the European Union as a fig leaf.
And when we look at statistics, the warning of drops in the sterling from the Bank of England and potential unemployment level being raised, would that just be, though, the short term effect that maybe organisations who are saying this and when it comes to the future that things will be back on an even footing? Would that be the case?
I think so, yeah. I think a lot of the problems that we've got actually stem from a lack of preparation. In the case of leaving, it doesn't seem like politicians have made any preparation for that to actually happen without a hitch. And because of all of the uncertainty, we've actually seen the pound drop by 25% during the referendum, the whole referendum campaign. And so it's really an issue of confidence. It's not really a problem with the British economy, although the British economy, like all major economies, has problems. But again, it's an issue of politics. It's an issue of decentralising power, of making sure that the European Union is not a fig leaf or a legitimising ideology for our own politicians to put in place various regulations and directives.
Yeah, and when we had, just a few weeks ago, when we had President Obama come into Britain, which also coincided with the time of the Queen's 90th birthday, so there's timing for you, on the behest of David Cameron, really to kind of say, well, we got the biggest figurehead here in global politics here beside me, but within that then came the line of being put back to the queue, which skeptics have pointed to that it undermined the usual strength of what they call the US-UK alliance going back to different presidents and prime ministers. Is that a potential worry, though, that the US won't be reliable as a strong trading partner in the years ahead?
Again, I think this is really more about geopolitics than it is about mutual trade deals. I mean, President Obama's intervention in British politics was taken with this visceral anti-Obama reaction from the British right, and they said the most appalling things about him. They said he said what he said because he was a Kenyan, and really these people seem to think that we should have a much closer relationship with the United States, whereas a libertarian doesn't. A libertarian doesn't want us to be in either the United States of Europe or the United States of America. And so we didn't have this visceral anti-Obama reaction.
Yeah, do you see, I mean, you pointed to in your blog about how this whole thing brings together strange alliances, maybe, let's say, in general, with George Galloway and Nigel Farage both as part of the Leave group, to use a broad term. Do you think, though, there are liabilities as well on the stage in terms of the personalities who will be involved as well, like going back to the Boris Johnson thing? Yeah.
Oh, well, Boris Johnson is by no means a liability. Boris Johnson is a bit of a buffoon, but he's just a political class neocon. People like Nigel Farage and people like George Galloway actually seem to be real people. And one of the great tragedies about this campaign is that the Electoral Commission actually decided to award the designation for the Vote for the Out campaign to Vote Leave rather than Grassroots Out. And Grassroots Out was a big non-partisan organisation with lots of different people in it that represented everyone on the political spectrum, whereas Vote Leave is this hollow, neoconservative, neoliberal, conservative party creature which doesn't represent what most people who want to leave actually think.
And Turkey's been big in the news now today, and there seems to be tension between the Prime Minister and President Erdogan. The big push is towards Turkey joining the EU bloc, and this brings into account, Turkey closer in their cultural values to the Middle East rather than Europe, and what does this mean for greater freedom of movement of citizens? Is there something to lose for Britain in that?
Well, this isn't something that I want to have to contemplate. I want us to leave the European Union. But yeah, I mean, freedom of movement has never been good for Britain, and most of the effects of mass immigration have been universally disastrous for Britain, and a good chunk of libertarians in Britain are actually acknowledging this, even if perhaps libertarianism is associated with open borders. But again, we should leave the European Union. I'm not going to comment on the internal affairs of Turkey, but again, this is something which should be in the hands of national government, not a European federal state.
And looking at the cost of this, that the cost of leaving as well, do you think it will save up instead of the tax that's basically paid towards the EU as it is $340 a year per household? Do you think this would save up to a lot of talk about the NHS could do with some extra money? I mean, what do you think of that?
Again, you can bandy about any statistics you like. I mean, the Nigel Farage camp say £350 a week, no, £350 million a week rather, which is about 18.2 billion a year. But the in camp say it's much less because of rebates. I personally don't care. I mean, the British government has a national debt of £1.6 trillion. 18 billion here or there won't make that much difference. It's really about making sure that the decisions taken by people like David Cameron and people like Michael Gove are actually decisions that are accountable to our Parliament and not the European Commission or the various European institutions. Okay,
and it's going to be close according to all these different polling agencies as well. It could be a very tight vote come that day in June. Thanks for talking, Keir. Keir Martland there, a British libertarian, and you'll hear from multiple voices on this subject, and we certainly plan to do so in the coming weeks ahead on Good Morning Dublin.